Meghan Markle has never been a member. I don't know if she's become a member now, but she had been working for Soho House since at least 2005.
Meghan Markle calls it destiny, but the people who've been around long enough, they call it something else entirely. Networking with a royal twist. Because let's be honest, fairy tales don't usually start with a Soho House membership card tucked inside a designer clutch. Prince Harry thought he knew every part of Meghan's past. Every photo, every story, every so-called coincidence. Until one night, while scrolling through an old private gallery, he stumbled on a photograph that made his chest tighten. It looked innocent enough at first glance. A sun-drenched yacht, golden champagne, the sound of waves in the background.
She didn't buy a membership. She was a working girl for Soho House.
People laughing like they had no secrets in the world. But there, in the corner, was something tiny that changed everything. A navy blue canvas bag, half hidden by a towel, stamped with the Soho House emblem. Most people would have missed it completely. But to Harry, that name carried a heavy echo of whispered connections, private dinners, and circles that never truly forget. It wasn't just a bag, it was a reminder that Meghan's story might not have started in Hollywood or with a royal meeting at all.
When she started on Suits and she befriended Jessica Mulroney, her status changed.
But in the discreet shadows of a place where luxury, power, and secrets quietly intertwined. Because Soho House wasn't just some fancy members-only club, it was the golden gate into a hidden world of power and privilege. It connected actresses to billionaires, models to politicians, and rising stars to the very people who could change their lives overnight. Behind those velvet curtains, deals were whispered, introductions were traded, and futures were quietly rewritten while the rest of the world had no clue. And suddenly, the timeline of Meghan's so-called fairy tale started to crack. The story the media sold us, a random meeting, an actress who won the heart of a prince, love that conquered royal tradition, started to sound too clean, too perfect. What if it wasn't chance at all?
She was one of my Deal or No Deal girls that were, she was a caddy for all of my celebrities.
What if the meeting was arranged from the start? Because that single yacht photo, the discreet Soho House bag, and the faces that somehow never appeared in interviews all pointed towards something much deeper. Harry was never supposed to see it. A web of introductions stretching from Istanbul to London to Toronto. Each city connected by the same mysterious network. Each friend leading back to one powerful name, Marcus Anderson. The man who opened doors for Meghan long before Harry ever did. Now, Harry isn't just doubting his marriage, he's rethinking the entire origin story.
Nothing beats the truth, the real fact.
Because when you realize your fairy tale might have been planned like a chess game, love doesn't feel magical anymore. It feels like a setup hiding in plain sight. It began quietly. Just another late night at Frogmore Cottage, long after the lights had dimmed and the staff had gone. Harry wasn't digging for gossip or drama. He was searching for truth. His desk was covered in scattered photos, glossy prints from old tabloids, saved Instagram posts, blurry paparazzi shots from years before Meghan ever stepped into royal life.
Prince Andrew, have you noticed how he completely avoids looking at Meghan Markle when she's around him or when she was around him?
But the more he looked, the more something started to feel off. It wasn't the places or the smiles that caught his attention. It was the pattern. In nearly every single photo, the same tiny details appeared again and again. A champagne glass etched with an elegant crest, a velvet invitation stamped with gold initials, a small pin barely visible on a friend's lapel. At first, it seemed meaningless, until he noticed the words, Soho House International. To the public, it was just an elite hideaway, a playground for celebrities and CEOs to sip cocktails away from cameras. But inside London's upper circles, Soho House had a different reputation entirely. It was where connections were engineered, careers were crafted, and reputations were built from scratch. Nothing there happened by accident. And right at the center of this polished machine stood one man, a man Harry had met only once in passing, but who now seemed to appear everywhere Meghan once had. Marcus Anderson, the name that kept showing up like a ghost in every corner of Meghan's past.
So when Meghan came along into the scene, I just thought, this is fascinating. How is this going to play out?
He wasn't some random acquaintance. He had been part of her life for years. Her travel partner, her trusted confidant, and, as many insiders whispered, her social strategist. According to archived society pages, old event guest lists, and barely remembered blog mentions, Marcus was the invisible thread tying Meghan to some of the most powerful figures across Europe and North America. Every discovery made Harry's heart pound harder. That yacht? It wasn't random. Those glamorous parties? Not spontaneous. And those picture-perfect friendships that seemed to appear out of nowhere? They were anything but accidental. It all looked planned, mapped, and executed with precision, like someone had drawn a blueprint for Meghan's ascent into his world. As the clock crept past midnight inside Frogmore Cottage, Harry's hands trembled over the photos. He started connecting faces, and what he saw made his stomach twist. The same people who'd once posed beside Meghan in those old, carefree photos were the exact same names now funding his royal charities.
So Jessica Mulroney introduced her to Marcus Anderson in Toronto.
That wasn't fate. That wasn't chance. That was design, architecture. And for the first time, Harry began to see the chilling possibility that the fairy tale he'd believed in so deeply might have been built on strategy, not love. No palace press release ever mentioned what really mattered. For years, the world swallowed a story that was just too perfect to question. A prince tired of royal rules, and an actress searching for something deeper than Hollywood fame. Two souls from different worlds, somehow colliding under the magic spell of fate. That's the version we were fed. The one polished by palace PR, dressed up by glossy magazines, and sold to the public as the modern love story that would heal the monarchy's image.
And I don't think he heard Meghan's voice. I think he heard his mother's voice.
Every smile, every soft focus photo shoot, every dreamy headline painted Meghan as the symbol of change. The woman who made people believe in love again. But behind the glow of those portraits and the carefully staged interviews, something didn't add up. The timeline was already bending. The so-called blind date arranged by a mutual friend wasn't as random as the press made it sound.
This gentleman right here, that's Nick Jones, the original founder of Soho House. Guess where he's going there? He's arriving at Meghan Markle and Harry's wedding as guest of honor. Oh yeah, Soho was present there.
That friend, as it turns out, wasn't just anyone. She was a long-standing member of Soho House London, the very network that had been quietly circling Meghan's world long before Harry entered it. The press conveniently skipped over the fact that Meghan had already been attending private Soho events in Toronto, gatherings strictly reserved for top-tier insiders, not everyday TV actresses. And right at the center of it all, Marcus Anderson, the man who managed those guest lists, controlled who sat where, and, according to those in the know, was at the very table where Meghan's introduction to Prince Harry was quietly arranged. Every coincidence suddenly had a footprint. Every encounter had a host. To the public, it looked like love at first sight. But to those inside the circuit, it looked like something else entirely. A love story written in advance. Even the geography told a story.
Jeffrey Epstein was also Harvey Weinstein, very prominent. There were members. Meghan Markle was just one of the working girls for Soho House. Call girl, working girl, escort, whatever you want to call it. That's what she was.
Those first photos of Meghan and Harry, the crisp park strolls, the romantic weekends in Botswana, looked effortless on the surface, but the rhythm of it all felt too polished to be real. Someone had been curating that image long before the cameras ever showed up. Every outing seemed perfectly timed, every angle captured just right, like a scene straight out of a royal PR playbook. And as the world cheered for their engagement, nobody noticed how smoothly Meghan's old social circle slipped into Harry's world. The same faces, the same smiles, just dressed in new roles. Because this wasn't a love story written by destiny, it was directed by design. But that script was starting to unravel. What began as one small discovery spiraled into something Harry could barely keep up with. The deeper he dug, the faster the connections multiplied. He began recognizing names, socialites, donors, business partners.
Harry, being a simple soul, has easily changed to suit Meghan's agenda.
All people who had once seemed separate from Meghan's past, until suddenly their faces appeared beside her in old photos taken years before he'd even met her. Different events, different continents, yet the same people kept showing up. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Archived guest lists placed Meghan at exclusive Soho House events across Istanbul, Madrid, and Barcelona between 2014 and 2016, mingling with financiers, diplomats, and heirs who would later reappear in Harry's inner circle. Every name linked back. Every detail connected like pieces of a puzzle she'd already completed before he even arrived.
That she arrived in London, full career, single girl, wasn't interested. Of course, she'd been coming to London since 2013, hunting for a man to marry. She wanted an Englishman. She was on a man hunt.
It wasn't random proximity. It was overlap. As Harry dug deeper, he stumbled across old blog posts from elite society writers describing Marcus Anderson's infamous private gatherings. They weren't parties. They were carefully curated nights of opportunity. Women were invited for their ambition, men for their power and influence, and every introduction served a quiet purpose within a much larger plan. Harry's stomach turned as he pieced it together. He realized he hadn't been the first royal Marcus had courted into his world, and Meghan wasn't the first actress to drift through those same glittering circles. But she was the one who understood the game and learned exactly how to stay in it. Then came the part that made everything feel darker. The finances didn't line up.
You know, this is what Meghan has been doing. She's a piece of Klingon, you know, like she clings to somebody who can get her there. So Meghan manages to befriend one person of a very popular group, and then that person introduces her to the others. And because that she's being brought in by somebody they trust, she's welcomed in.
Soho House memberships, luxury flights, 5-star villas. None of it matched her TV paychecks. Harry started tracing old invoices and came across hints of something hidden. Bills paid through corporate accounts, expenses covered by unnamed partnerships. In simple terms, someone else had been footing the bill, quietly keeping her lifestyle afloat long before royal life began. When Harry tried reaching out to people who once floated through those same circles, the silence was loud. Calls went unanswered, messages disappeared. And finally, one old acquaintance broke the silence just long enough to whisper, "Don't dig too deep. That world protects its own." That's when the fairy tale started to fracture. Every new revelation pushed Harry closer to one haunting realization. Maybe the story of how they met wasn't love at first sight, but something far more orchestrated. The life Harry thought was built on love might have been constructed from strategy. And if the timeline was wrong, what else had been quietly rewritten behind palace doors? By the time he followed the final thread, the pattern was impossible to deny.
Meghan Markle did know Prince Andrew, and she knew Sarah incredibly well, which makes Zara a liar because she says, "I didn't know Meghan Markle until she invited me to her wedding." That is BS.
Every introduction, every photograph, every chance encounter that pulled them together pointed back to one shadowy figure operating behind the curtain, Marcus Anderson. To the public, Marcus was charming, well-dressed, and discreet, a hospitality consultant for an elite members network. But to those who had attended his private soirees, he was much more than a host. He was a matchmaker of power, a curator of access. And Meghan, she had been one of his most carefully refined protégés. Insiders whispered that Marcus's private circle functioned like a finishing school for the ambitious.
They were not poor. They just wanted to land a rich man and make easy money. And the worst part of it all is that Meghan Markle was already with Trevor Engelson there. She was already living with him. There was no need for her to be hustling this way.
Women were guided into the right rooms, coached on their posture, their tone, even their presence. They learned how to navigate wealth and influence as if they'd been born into it. By the time Meghan crossed paths with Harry, she wasn't just another rising star. She was the apex of Marcus's quiet design. But the revelations didn't stop there. When Harry revisited their wedding guest list, his blood ran cold. Nearly half of Meghan's invitees weren't old Hollywood friends or family. They were linked directly to Marcus's inner circle. Brand executives, private club directors, and social power players who had been there long before royal life entered the picture.
Because I believe Jessica Mulroney was a member, along with her husband, of Soho House, not Meghan.
The ceremony millions had watched as a fairy tale union now looked, in hindsight, like a perfectly staged summit of influence. And then came the memory that still haunted him. A voicemail from William, calm, but edged with warning. Be careful. You're not marrying into a romance. You're marrying into a strategy. At the time, Harry brushed it off as brotherly jealousy. But now, replaying the message years later, scrolling through the photos, the faces, the patterns, he finally understood. The illusion wasn't fading, it was shattering. Every polished frame, every accidental meeting, every fairy tale moment now looked like part of a performance, one where love might have been the story, but power was always the script. Every detail of their relationship now felt choreographed. From those accidental introductions to the staged charity smiles, from whispered headlines to the ringing of wedding bells, nothing felt organic anymore. And when Harry looked at the woman beside him, he no longer saw destiny. He saw design. Because in this story, the prince didn't rescue the actress. The actress rewrote the fairy tale and crowned herself as its queen. Once the facade began to crack, there was no unseeing it. The cheerful interviews suddenly felt rehearsed. The hand-holding, the matching outfits, the perfect sound bites. They all looked like scenes from a script Harry had never been allowed to read.
So this is way back in 2006. I wonder if Trevor ever knew about this. People can have double lives because look at these pictures could not be shown in the United States, all over North America, only in certain countries. And I don't think Trevor would even thought back then of going through a VPN and seeing where Meghan Markle is or what she's doing.
The illusion of love had been replaced by strategy, polished and branded for the world to consume. Behind closed doors, the signs multiplied. Conversations that once felt spontaneous now carried a rehearsed rhythm. Meetings appeared on Meghan's schedule that Harry knew nothing about, and names casually mentioned in private began surfacing in the press, quoted word for word. He realized that every message, every interview, every statement he made was being shaped, softened, and spun. filtered through Meghan's expanding network of advisors, many of them linked to the Soho House web he had tried to escape. What used to feel like love began to feel managed. Even the palace noticed. When officials described Meghan as savvy, they meant strategic. When journalists called her independent, insiders quietly whispered, calculating. Every move was a brand maneuver. Every photo, a product launch.
And that ridiculous story about how they first met. The whole thing was a tissue of inaccuracies, to be polite.
And as Meghan publicly claimed she was breaking free from royal control, she was secretly constructing an empire of her own. One brand deal, one documentary, one carefully negotiated image contract at a time. The fairy tale had evolved into something sharper, colder, and far more profitable. Harry wasn't just losing control of the narrative, he was realizing he'd never owned it in the first place. Harry, once seen as the world's most untouchable royal, now felt like an accessory in his own story. He wasn't the headline anymore. He was the supporting role in hers. Even his memoir, insiders whispered, didn't sound entirely like him. Sure, the words carried his tone, but the framing? That belonged to someone else. Sources claimed ghostwriters with quiet ties to Meghan's media circle had shaped entire chapters, subtly steering the story toward her version of the truth. And through it all, one name kept reappearing. Marcus Anderson. Still close, still lurking just beyond the spotlight. A shadow advisor, seen at private gatherings, quietly credited for key media introductions, and behind-the-scenes networking. The same name, the same pattern, the same thread weaving through every stage of their public reinvention. By the time Harry realized how much control had shifted, it was already too late.
Meghan Markle only becomes prominent for Soho House, guys, after she starts being on Suits and she's introduced to Marcus Anderson. And then she gets more consistent and more prominent work, okay? Because then she could be in the presence of Marcus Anderson.
Meghan had mastered a skill no royal etiquette class had ever prepared him for: narrative ownership. She didn't just leave the royal institution, she replaced it. And the rebel prince who once challenged the crown suddenly found himself serving a new kind of monarchy. One quieter, sharper, and infinitely more powerful. Because sometimes the throne isn't made of gold, it's made of influence. And Meghan sits on hers effortlessly, without ever needing a crown. When the palace gates finally shut behind them, the world believed they were walking into peace. A quiet life far from cameras and control. But the silence never came, because Meghan had learned something the royal family never truly understood. In a world built entirely on image, power doesn't belong to those with titles or bloodlines. It belongs to the one who tells the story, and Meghan controls that narrative better than anyone alive. Almost overnight, Meghan's empire expanded. Her team ballooned with new power players. PR executives, Hollywood strategists, and celebrity image architects flooded in. None of them had royal experience, but they didn't need it. They knew how to build a brand of monarchy that could thrive outside the palace gates. The documentaries, the interviews, the tell-all specials. They weren't heartfelt confessions. They were precision campaigns.
Being brainwashed by these Hollywood people who think this is the way to make money and, in the end, destroy our monarchy to make their fortune.
Every project rolled out with surgical timing. A royal controversy one week, a vulnerable revelation the next. Every release perfectly countered headlines she couldn't control. When the press attacked, a sympathetic magazine profile dropped. When questions surfaced, a glossy rebrand appeared, like clockwork. Insiders close to Netflix executives later admitted that early drafts of their series were heavily rewritten after Meghan's personal review sessions. Scenes were softened, quotes reshaped, and storylines reframed until the narrative felt exactly as she intended. The story wasn't just told, it was engineered. And behind every edit, every photo, every carefully worded interview, one thread remained unbroken: her original Soho House circle. The same communication advisors, the same media consultants, and of course, the same Marcus Anderson, quietly consulting from behind the curtain.
Guest list to her wedding showed her real ambition was to be a star in California.
His fingerprints were everywhere, ensuring each story echoed one consistent message: Meghan the victim, Meghan the visionary, Meghan the unstoppable voice of change. Even Harry's tone began to shift. The once fiery prince who spoke with raw defiance now sounded cautious, polished, even apologetic. His independence turned into an echo, a reflection of her message, not his own. Insiders started calling it narrative inversion, a masterclass in flipping public perception. Criticism became compassion. Ambition turned into activism. Strategy was rebranded as survival. And by the time the cameras stopped rolling, one truth became painfully clear. Meghan hadn't escaped the monarchy's media machinery at all. She had simply rebuilt it on her own terms. And this time, she was the one sitting in the director's chair. She had rebuilt the entire system. Only this time, she was at the center. In Meghan's new world, truth wasn't uncovered. It was edited, frame by frame, moment by moment, until only one version remained: hers. Maybe it was always destined to end this way, not with a crown on her head, but with control in her hands. Not inside a palace, but inside a narrative. Because when you trace every thread, from that mysterious yacht photo to the orchestrated introductions, from the hand-picked wedding guests to the carefully timed media empire that followed, the image transforms completely. What looked like a love story begins to resemble something far more calculated. It wasn't a romance story. It was a recruitment story. Every connection, every friendship, every perfect opportunity wasn't coincidence. It was construction. The blueprint of a life designed to ascend step by step, room by room, until she stood above it all. And at the very center stands the woman the world thought it already knew. To her admirers, Meghan Markle is transformation embodied, the girl who rose above judgment, class, and cruelty to redefine what royalty looks like in the modern age. To her critics, she's the embodiment of ambition, polished into empathy. Every word rehearsed, every gesture perfected, every tear camera-ready. But to Harry, she's something else entirely. The unsolved equation that keeps him awake at night. The love that might have been genuine, and the manipulation that might have made it impossible to tell the difference. Because when every photo, every timeline, every connection points back to orchestration, what, if anything, was ever real? Was it destiny or design? Love or leverage? The line between the two had vanished, leaving only the story she wanted the world to see. And the prince, who finally realized he was just a chapter in her script. Was it fate that brought Meghan into Harry's life? Or a script she never admitted she'd been following all along? Maybe it was both. Maybe neither. And that's what still haunts him. The world saw a fairy tale, the perfect royal love story. But Harry, he saw the machinery behind it, the hidden hands, the carefully pulled strings. And once you've seen the strings, you can never believe in the magic again. Maybe the official story is true. Maybe it isn't. But one thing is absolutely certain. None of it was accidental. Every moment, every introduction, every headline had a purpose, and it all led exactly where it was supposed to. What the world thought was destiny might have been the most sophisticated piece of image engineering the royal family has ever seen. And if you think this story ends here, think again. Because the pattern doesn't stop in London or Montecito. It stretches much further. To see just how deep this web really goes, watch our previous investigation where we uncovered Harry and Meghan exposed in NYC Awards, including the shocking footage of their public argument that left insiders speechless. You're watching T-Torch, where we don't just repeat the headlines, we pull back the curtain and show you the truth hiding between them.